Actually, let me just share this. Okay, gentlemen joining this section, I welcome you. Just to drop a little insight on the Socratic model of knowledge, which is the ideal for practical living, for existential, for authentic living. Um, um, oh, now, um, Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher, began his philosophy and proceeded to develop his philosophy around the idea of knowledge as virtue. Knowledge as virtue. And in so doing, he developed a method of dialectics which he called intellectual midwifery. The target of which is to help people to come to the knowledge of the good as opposed to knowledge of evil. He had insisted that the reason why there is evil is because of ignorance. So, in essence, while knowledge is virtue, ignorance is vice. People do evil because they are ignorant. So, in order to help people to live the good life, they have to be taught and exposed to the good. And how to expose them to the good is to give them knowledge. And that is why he says knowledge is virtue. You know, when people heard Socrates talked about knowledge is virtue, they criticized him even in the ancient time, in the modern epoch of philosophy, and even till date. People criticize him because they simply did not understand how Socrates can or has argued that once somebody has knowledge, he is virtuous. Socrates said that because for him, knowledge is action, knowledge is activity, knowledge is not theoretical, knowledge is practice, is practical. So that once you claim to know, it should be seen in your action. Knowledge is not just a deposit of, um, of content in the brain or in the. It is activity. It is something that is seen in the character, in the mental disposition and the moral disposition of. So that knowledge is virtue means that to do. In essence, also it is the height of ignorance and stupidity. And that was why he has so much quarrel with the sophists who use their knowledge as a deceptive tool, you know, a manipulative tool to exploit the ordinary Greek citizens in the polis, the ancient Greek period. So the question now is, what is the nature of knowledge that Socrates demanded and equated or ranked as virtue? What is the extent? To what extent do you need to know for your knowledge to be considered virtue? Is it every knowledge that is virtuous? Is it every knowledge that is virtuous? What is the level, the extent, the quality of knowledge that should be considered as virtue? What is the quality of knowledge, the degree of knowledge, the disposition of knowledge, if you like, the quality of knowledge, the character of knowledge that makes one to live a life of authenticity? What is that? What is it? What is it in knowledge that makes Socrates believe that when we know, we should act accordingly? What is it? So, what we are going to do now is we are going to look at practical implications of this Socratic ideal. We are going to look at practical implications of the Socratic ideal. We are going to look at knowledge, the nature of knowledge, and the quality of knowledge that Socrates considered as virtue. And then we'll look at other implications deriving from this Socratic model of knowledge, and then how it informs our way of life and our attitude to action. Now, based on what Socrates discussed, we are going to identify three types of knowledge, because it is not just every kind of knowledge that is virtue. Clearly, if every kind of knowledge is virtue, then with the level of exposure and education globally, there should be more good than evil in the world. But because not all kinds of knowledge are knowledge, in parentheses, are knowledge that fits into the Socratic model. So many acquire knowledge and yet live in ignorance, and yet prefer to do the evil instead of the good. So we are going to now check the class and caliber of knowledge that suits the Socratic model and that is required to translate knowing into doing. So there are three types of knowledge, if you like, three types of knowledge, three calibers of knowledge. There are three. Now, there is what I describe as knowledge as a given. Knowledge as a given. Then there is knowledge as confrontation of the given. And then there is knowledge as self-awareness. Now, these three types of knowledge maintain a kind of dialectics with each other. A kind of dialectics similar to what Hegel talks about the synthesis, the thesis, synthesis, and antithesis. There is knowledge as the given, knowledge as confrontation of the given, and then knowledge as self-awareness. These three divisions or levels of knowledge, they have a dialectic relationship with one another. They have it, and they are very, very important. One can grow on this ladder of knowledge until it reaches the top, the highest, the peak, which is the knowledge as self-awareness. And one can receive knowledge as given and then remain at that level because he or she may not be able to rise to the level of confrontation, and from there get to self-awareness. Now, the first type of knowledge, the given, is the first stage in the dialectics. The thesis, the second type of knowledge, is the thesis. Then the second type of knowledge, confrontation, is the antithesis, while the third type, self-awareness, is the synthesis. How does this play out? Now, what do I describe? What do I mean in the Socratic perspective by knowledge as a given? What do I mean? Now, knowledge as a given is the form of knowledge that is similar to what we may describe as untested hypothesis. Yes, it's a type of knowledge. You can describe it as an untested hypothesis. It is knowledge gained and applied in the resolution of crisis of living without prior consideration of the source, feasibility, and plausibility of the knowledge. So there are kinds of knowledge, kinds of mental dispositions we use daily in resolving our problems. We use them and they work out for us without even we thinking about the source, the quality of the knowledge. We just use them, we resolve our problems, and we move on. So we use these kinds of knowledge in our daily lives. Okay? This is the first form of knowledge. Every human person acquires it in the course of growth and development. Every individual has knowledge as given. It's the basic, it's fundamental. If you like, you can call it commonsensical knowledge. Okay? So, but the individual, you acquire this kind of knowledge from indoctrination, from the school, okay, even from the church, even from your elders, from your parents, your sisters, and sometimes even from observation, you acquire the knowledge. It's basic. Okay? Sometimes you also acquire it from experience. You acquire it from experience of experiment. You've seen what people do, you acquire it. So you just acquire it is, you can, like I said, you can call it common sense knowledge. Is you use it and then you solve your daily problems and you move on. But like I said, it is not a sufficient kind of knowledge. It is expected that every individual should grow beyond knowledge as the given and reach the next level, which is knowledge as confrontation. Okay? It is knowledge as given is residual, if you like. It is the knowledge that you gain from your interaction with persons through socialization. It is the people, the basic way of approaching issues in the world. The basic way. Almost every person has access to it. Like I said, you can ordinarily describe it as commonsensical knowledge. It is basic, it's fundamental. You can get it from school, you can get it from home, you can get it from socialization and all whatnot. So you can call it conventional knowledge. It's open to all. Almost everyone can access it. Now, like I said, every individual is expected to grow beyond the knowledge as given. But not all do. Many live and die even as adults, even as educated people, operating on the level of knowledge as given. Now, an individual who builds the principles of his life on this kind of knowledge, that's the knowledge as a given, will not be able to deal adequately with some very issues in life, what we can call absurdity. When he's confronted with some very difficult situations that demands personal conviction and self-awareness, he falls apart. He may not be able to make the right decision when he finds himself at a very tight corner. This kind of knowledge is not equal to virtue. And this kind of knowledge cannot translate to action when the going becomes tough, because it's not based on self-conviction. Okay? So it is very, very possible that the person that has this kind of knowledge, whether be it a priest, a professor, or whoever, he will always look for the shortcut and escape from problems. Any problem that his basic understanding cannot resolve, he tries to cut corner, even if it involves doing the wrong thing, so that he can survive. That is knowledge as given. So anyone that builds his principles of life on the knowledge as given definitely falls apart along the line, because knowledge as given is not robust, it's not experimented, it's not based on self-conviction and awareness. Okay? Now, like I said, the individual is supposed to grow in that ladder of knowledge and arrive at knowledge as confrontation. Now, what does this knowledge as confrontation mean? In this dialectics I'm talking about, the individual is supposed to move from knowledge as the giving to confrontation. But not all do. But if he manages to move, he becomes stronger, he becomes more focused, he becomes more convinced. Now, but there is a crisis at the level of knowledge as confrontation. What does this knowledge of confrontation mean? It is the antithesis, at the stage of antithesis in the dialectics. It is not a type of knowledge in itself. It is not a type of knowledge in itself, strictly speaking. But what knowledge as confrontation is it is the realization that all that one has always considered as unquestionably true or normative, and maybe even infallible, may not be the case. You have been told in the first stage that this is how this is done. If you do this way, you are going to achieve results. Through indoctrination, catechesis, other socialization and other forms or peer influences, you have gathered at the first level in knowledge of giving basic and fundamental you resolve practical life issues. But at the level of knowledge of confrontation, you begin to realize that some of these knowledge principles that have been given to you are not able to resolve the problems and the crises you face. You begin to realize that some of the things they have told you, some of the things you know, are not exactly as they seem. It's a confrontation. So in this case, the individual begins to question critically the values on which the foundations of his morality are built. So knowledge as confrontation is therefore a pathway. It is a pathway, a route to the final stage, which is knowledge as self-awareness. So most of the times, what brings about this critical questioning is of already accepted knowledge is what we may term existential divorce. Okay? Because maybe you have told if you do this and this, you gain this result. And you have been doing it and getting that result. But a time comes in life when you apply such principles, it doesn't work out. That's what. So by essential divorce, I refer to the realization that there is a great divide, a kind of gulf and disagreement between theory and practice, between what is known to be true and what experience presents as truth. So this kind of realization is necessary for growth in knowledge, but not all accept it as an invitation to growth. It can lead to the confrontation within them, but are scared to ponder on it. And what happens is that they find a new way and so okay, what I'm saying is this. Now, this thing is internal. When you begin to raise this confrontation, and remain and continue to live by their previously given convictions because they are afraid of growth. There are some people that are scared of confronting their doubts. They are scared of raising critical questions. So they don't grow beyond confrontation. They even go back to knowledge as the given. They don't want anything that will subject their convictions to doubt. So they are scared of losing themselves when they confront their doubts, their fears. Okay? So instead of confrontation, they prefer to remain in the giving. Right? So it is supposed to be an opportunity to grow, to become better, to receive even more clarity and insight. But because of development of people's minds and intellects, sometimes many are unable to reconcile the difference between what they already know, that is the giving, and what experience is presenting to them, the confrontation they are experiencing at the later stage. So those who end up at the level of knowledge as confrontation, they live in a confused way. They are very far from authentic living. So they are neither here nor there. So it is not supposed to be a type of knowledge or a stage of knowledge where someone should subsist or exist in. It's supposed to be a passage to the synthesis, to the next stage, which is self-awareness. But some people, because of poor intellectual development and the closeness of their mind, the lack of openness in mind, they remain in confrontation. They remain in perpetual questioning. They don't go back to the giving or grow into the next stage, which is self-awareness. They remain in perpetual questioning. They keep raising doubts and they get themselves lost. Some others who are scared of the confrontation entirely, they don't even get to the stage. They run away back and continue to exist in the giving because they don't want anything that will shake the foundation of their knowledge. So they remain in the giving and continue to exist and live based on other people's experience. Now, the one who tries, goes through confrontation and a kind of resolve the confrontation grows into the third part, which is knowledge as self self-awareness. Now, this knowledge as self-awareness is the truest form of knowledge. It is the truest form of knowledge. This form of knowledge is the product of the individual's ability to reconcile adequately the difference between what is already known, that is the given, and that which is presented by experience in the stage of confrontation. So the ability to resolve the crisis, the controversy between knowledge as given and knowledge as confrontation brings you into knowledge as self-awareness. The individual overcomes the troubles and conflicts that go with the stage of confrontation. What happens is that he comes as a better informed person. He acquires some kind of assurance in support of what he considers to be practical truth and knowledge. So what confrontation does necessarily is not as if it takes you, it refutes or denounces what you already know. No. What it does is that it gives you better clarity, more clarity. It makes you more convinced, because now what is given has been tested and purified in the crucible of what? Of experience, of personal experience. And then the reconciliation, the result of that, the consequence of that, the product of that molds you into a better person. Because now you become self-aware. The knowledge as given, the knowledge you receive from people is no longer their knowledge, but it becomes your personal knowledge because it's now your personal conviction. So the confrontation can also make you to realize that some of the things you know and you have always done may not be right. Then it will now chisel or refine your knowledge and better reposition it to deal with life challenges. So what happens is that in knowledge as self-awareness, knowledge becomes very personal to the individual, because all that is known to him are now a product of his personal findings and experience, not convention or opium. I've already explained that. So this kind of knowledge could be described as tested hypothesis. Remember, when I was explaining giving, I told you that you can describe it as untested hypothesis because it has not been tested by the vicissitude of life, by the travails of life. So when it is now tested, when knowledge as given passes through the stage of confrontation and it is now tested and purified, and the person manages to arrive at the stage of self-awareness. So the knowledge as self-awareness, because it has been tested, it has undergone a lot of fire and heat, and it has, and it has been remolded and survived the confrontation. We can call it tested knowledge. The person that receives knowledge as given, for instance, he comes to the realization, he's told that hard work, for instance, he's told that hard work pays as the basic knowledge he receives. Maybe he was taught that in the church or even at school or even at home. He gets to confrontation at a certain point in life where he works hard and hard. The more he works hard, the more he feels. Even his friends that are not hardworking are making it. It's a crisis, it's a confrontation. He may begin to ask himself, what am I doing? Why am I wasting my time working hard? What could be the way forward? Why is nothing working out for me? Whereas those that are not working hard are making progress. You get? So that is confrontation. That is confrontation. So if care is not taken, he fails in confrontation. He fails to find himself and find a way to reconcile the crisis, the conflict that is ongoing. Okay, he might relapse to knowledge and giving, and might even begin to live an entirely immoral and life, because he has not been able to reconcile those things. But if while going to that experience of confrontation, hard work is no longer leading to success, he finds a way to reconcile his experiences with what has been taught to him And he realizes that even if maybe at that point it is not paying, at some point in life it pays. You discover that if self-awareness triumphs over this confrontation that he's going through, what will happen is that his knowledge will become more solid. This idea that hard work leads to success will become more solid, more founded, because it has now been proven by experience. That's what we are saying. So what happens is that the difference between knowledge as given and knowledge as self-awareness is that in the former, that is in knowledge as given, there is no self-conviction or any attempt at arriving at such. While in the latter, that is knowledge as self-awareness, it is founded on self-conviction after the resolution of an existential divorce. Because remember, I told you that that confrontation is usually caused by an existential divorce, a situation whereby what you have always known to be this, do this and this, you get this, doesn't work out that way, is an existential divorce. What has always been told to you as the right way is no longer appearing to be right. It is an existential divorce. So that divorce is the confrontation, because it brings the confrontation, it is the confrontation itself. When it is resolved, the person comes out, is more self-aware, his knowledge is more personal, he is more convinced. That's why it is said that what? Experience is the best teacher. That experience is the best teacher, is the product of a knowledge that has undergone confrontation. And once the person realizes that experience is his best teacher, he has arrived at self-awareness, because his own personal experience has taught him genuine lesson about what he already knows, what he already knew, and then he becomes more convinced. So what it means is that authentic existence, living the good life, living the Socratic model of knowledge, which is doing, is only possible with knowledge as self-awareness. Somebody can be living all through his life, living well, based on this will happen. Yet, because he has not been confronted by existential divorce. He has not found or passed through any situation that questions his conviction, that tests his knowledge, that makes him to begin to recount or doubt or rethink what he already knew. So it is when that person, the knowledge he has been operating with or on, is subjected to this kind of confrontation, and the person prevails and continues to live and act based on same conviction, that you can now say that the person is moral or living a good life. Because then the life is now a subject of self-conviction based on self-knowledge. And it is because of this knowledge and self-awareness that Socrates says that what? That what? An unexamined life is not worth living. And it says what? Mortal, know thyself. Mortal, know thyself. So when Socrates is saying that knowledge is virtue, he's referring to what? Knowledge as self-awareness. Knowledge as self-awareness. Because when you are acting based on self-conviction, your knowledge is grounded on personal experience, conviction. You will be ready to die for that. For what? You can even be ready to sacrifice everything for that you have believed in. Because it is obvious that what the foundation of your knowledge and of your principles is not based on hearsay. It is rather based on personal experience and conviction. And it is based on self-awareness. You are completely certain that what you are doing is absolutely right. So you can even face the threat of gunshot and yet remain very, very firm on your conviction. Because now, as a mortal, you have known thyself based on an a life that you have examined under the stage of confrontation. So you become very, very robust. You become very, very determined, because now you have come to the realization that what you have always been told, even though it may not be perfectly correct, now you have managed to see what should be added to it to make it better. Or on the other hand, even if it is correct, based on personal experience, you have been convinced that yes, this thing is actually true. Now you now have a reason why it is true. In knowledge as given, you could be doing, there are things that you are doing or principles you are using to live your life. But if you are asked why do you do these things, you cannot explain, because there's no personal experience. You just do it because others are doing it. You wake up, you go to church on Sunday because others are going. It's a given. But there is a stage where you get when you have been confronted by absurdities of life, by the turbulence of existence, right? Where you have considered going to church on Sunday as useless, but somehow came to the realization is necessary. Now, in spite of all what you passed through, you prevailed and kept going to church. And then somebody will come and ask you, now, what's the essence of going to church on Sundays? Based on your personal conviction, you will see the kind of the depth of answer you are going to give to the person, because it is based on your experience, your subjective experience, and a kind of deep conviction that can only proceed only from an examined life. So in essence, when Socrates says knowledge is virtue, he is referring to knowledge as self-awareness. Unfortunately, many of us live, exist, and act based on knowledge as given. And that is why we are still ignorant. We do not know, even though we think we know. And that is why we always do the wrong thing, in spite of we having knowledge of the right thing. Because it is not based on self-conviction, on self-awareness. It is not made based on an examined life. So we know that this is the right thing to do, because we have not discovered ourselves, no self-awareness. We do the wrong thing. We act on knowledge as given because it has not been tested. But once the knowledge is tested and there is conviction, you will see that that thing that is right, you will always do it. And any day you fail to do it, you have deep remorse for not doing it. You will see that there will be a very conscious effort to do what is right. An unexamined life is not worth living. It's a deep statement. Mortal, know thyself is even deeper. Cicero will tell you that the highest war you can fight is the war against thyself. That anyone who conquers himself is a victor. Because they know that if as an individual, you know yourself, you live your life based on self-conviction, 99% of your present problems are resolved. Because you will not live your life on yes see. You will be a man of self-conviction. You do only what you are sure is correct. Your principles will govern you. That is only at the level of knowledge and self-awareness. So, to know is to do for Socrates only abounds or applies at the level of knowledge and self-awareness. Knowledge is virtue. Prevails only when knowledge is self-awareness. Now, this same Socratic knowledge and self-awareness, has two distinctive qualities that we need to examine. Two distinctive, very, very important qualities that we need to examine. This knowledge and self-awareness, it has two very, very distinctive qualities that needs examination. The first one is intentionality, and the second one is assertiveness. The first one is intentionality, and the second one is assertiveness. Now, Our idea of intentionality here is not similar. It's similar, but it's not the same as the usage in phenomenology introduced by uh, Francis Brentano under philosophy of mind, which Edmund Husserl copied and used in his phenomenological method. No, that is not we are referring to. That is not the intentionality we are referring to. It is similar. Our idea of intentionality here is similar, but it's not the same. Now, by intentionality here, strictly speaking, I am referring to a blend between ideals and action, a blend between your ideals as an individual and your action. It is a distinctive quality of knowledge and self-awareness. Someone that is self-aware and whose principles of life are based on that examined life, his ideals always blend with his actions. He does what he says and he does what he says and says what he does. There's always this agreement, this symbiosis, this correspondence between action and idea. And this is what we call a man of principle. You see it in the life of Socrates. He did not barely taught philosophy. He embodied it. He lived his principles in his life. His principles were seen in his way of life. That is an intentional knowledge, an intentional philosopher. Okay? So, and that is what we mean by intentionality as a quality of the highest point of Socratic knowledge and self-awareness. The man who is self-aware is intentional. What it means is that what? His actions are always in agreement with his principles, with his ideals. So that kind of person is purposive, right? In this case, intentionality implies knowing that which is right according to one's set standard and principles of knowledge, and acting based on that set standard. It's not what we have today in school. You see a professor of philosophy or a professor of any discipline. Clearly, a professor should be somebody that operates with the highest standards and principles. But you see the person acting in such a way that betrays his principles. He teaches this and acts the other thing. He's not intentional. And it is because he is not self-aware. In the Socratic balance, if he is actually ignorant. In fact, he is stupid, not even ignorant, because you have amassed a great amount of knowledge and you don't live by them or by it. So you are a kind of self-betrayal. You are betraying yourself. So you are living against your own self. Why? Because the life is not examined, and so it lacks intentionality. There's this gulf, this disagreement between the ideals he has learned, he has in mind, and the way he acts. He knows the right thing to do, but he never does it. That is still ignorance. So when Socrates suggested that knowledge is doing, right, and that people act immorally because they are ignorant, this was exactly what he was pointing at. Intentionality. So Socrates simply couldn't understand why people will truly know the good and then fail to act in accordance with the good. He never understood it. He never accepted it. For him, it is impossible. To know is to do. And that is intentionality. Because when you know and do, when knowing and doing becomes equal to each other, it means that what? Ideals and principles are blended, are co-equal. They correlate. One is equal to the other. So what it means is that intentionality is an aspect of knowledge, And if you like, knowledge itself is an aspect of intentionality. Okay? And so the second aspect of knowledge is action. So you can say that knowledge is equal to intentionality, whereby intentionality is equal to what? Action plus ideal. So in essence, simply put, if you simplify that equation, you can say that what? Knowledge is equal to what? Ideal plus action. And that ideal plus action is actually intentionality. So the self-aware individual, the person that acts based on self-awareness, is actually intentional. What it means is that what? His ideals are equal to his principle. They blend. His ideals and principles they blend. They agree. I hope that is clear. So, but unfortunately, due to factors ranging from internal to external pressures, even those who have managed to arrive at the highest level of knowledge and self-awareness, they still fail to act according to their convictions. For me, they have not even arrived at self-awareness. Because if you actually arrive at self-awareness, the kind of self-awareness that Socrates was pointing at when he says that, mortal, know thyself, right? When he says that knowledge is virtue, if you arrive there, you will always do or act by your principles. Some people will even say, this guy, you are very stubborn, that you are rigid, you are not malleable. Look at Peter Obi of our time. He's an example. You see him define every human logic and living by his principles. He's a philosopher king. Somebody that is self-convinced. And you see it in the life of Socrates. He even died based on his principles. Even when he was given an escape route, he rejected and preferred to die by his principles. That is conviction. That is self-awareness. That is intentionality in knowledge. That is someone whose principles are conterminous, are in agreement with his actions. So next, let's look at another aspect of this Socratic knowledge: assertiveness. Assertiveness. Now, assertiveness, as used here, refers to the awareness of and the deliberate use of one's freedom, capacity, and knowledge. Okay, let me repeat. Assertiveness, as used here, it refers to the deliberate use of one's freedom, the capacity to make free choices, and the knowledge that every choice carries a responsibility. It is the awareness of and the deliberate use of one's freedom. That is the capacity to make free choices and the knowledge that every choice carries a responsibility. So in assertiveness, there is awareness. There's awareness, and then there is the deliberate use of freedom. There's a deliberate use of our free choices. And there's also the awareness of responsibility. So assertiveness is awareness of our freedom, and our ability to make free choices, and yet our realization that there's always a responsibility that comes out of our choices. So now, assertiveness is the ability to contract or to proceed into a particular kind of action. Right? Given that we are aware of the consequence of that action, we use our freedom and face the responsibility that is a consequence of our freedom. We don't run away from it. That's assertiveness. Assertiveness is like, I know I know what to do. And I know that if I do this, this will be the consequences. yet I proceed to do it. It's like related to the Jean-Paul Sartre's concept of freedom, that freedom is responsibility. So assertiveness here is the readiness to act based on freedom of choice and the disposition to courageously face whatever responsibility that arises due to the free choice taken. I rightly said it that it is similar to what Jean-Paul Sartre preached when he talked about absolute freedom, but we are not taking it to the extreme. This thing we are talking about here is the opposite of what Sartre called bad faith, which is the fear of making choices because of the fear of the consequences. Flight. So what it means is that an assertive individual knows exactly what he wants. He knows where he is going. He knows what to do and how to do such. And he is not the type to be unduly influenced by anybody, no matter the pressure applied. He's an intentional individual. He is someone that is absolutely self-aware. He doesn't follow the crowd, he follows his conviction. He lives by his principles and damns the consequences. I repeat, an assertive individual knows exactly what he wants. He knows where he is going. He knows what to do and how to do such, and he is not the type to be unduly influenced by anybody, no matter the pressure applied. This is assertiveness. This is assertiveness. This is assertiveness. So, it is the height, the peak, the apogee of a life of self-awareness, the life of knowledge, the life of knowledge that is virtue. You know, there are many persons that have good principles. They know their principles. They try every day to live by it. But yet, when it matters most, they don't live like by it. The reason is because they are not assertive. Fear and some other things make them, they shrink and they run away from their responsibility. Fear. But the assertive individual, because of his absolute conviction, he damns the consequences. This is not about being careless or about being ruthless. It is about sticking to conviction, sticking to self-conviction. I know this is the right thing, and I'm going to do it and face the consequences. That is assertiveness. It is not carelessness or throwing caution to the wind. No, it is not. It is rather the cautious application of one's conviction, because the person is very, very self-aware. Now, there are many examples of people in the past who have embodied this Socratic idea of knowledge, knowing is true. They have lived by it. Socrates himself is number one. He's the number one model. There are others. But for the purpose of this lesson and for the purpose of this discussion and the audience, I feel will benefit more from it, I'm going to pick Augustine of Hippo as an example, a practical example of someone who embraced all I have discussed and lived it by his life, because his life gives us a perfect picture of all the stages we have touched on here. Now, the example of St. Augustine of Hippo. Now, look at St. Augustine's journey from Christianity to paganism, atheism, and then back to Christianity. His journey is a perfect example of the application of knowledge, intentionality, and assertiveness. I'm going to explain how. Now, he applied all this in the quest for a meaningful existence, a life that is based on self-awareness and conviction, not what people told him. Now, Augustine was born and baptized a Catholic Christian and brought up under the care of a saintly mother called Monica. Augustine was actually supposed to be a model Christian, following the examples of his mother, even though his father was a drunk and wayward. But the mother, according to the story, took proper care of him. However, this was not to be. He received the Christian faith, called it knowledge as given. He received the Christian faith, was baptized, taught in the Christian way as a Catholic from his earliest stage, and joined others in the practice of faith. This practice of faith, he never understood, but he joined from this earliest stage as an infant, a young boy growing up in Carthage. He joined others in the practice of faith. He goes to church on Monday, or goes to daily mass, goes for catechesis, does everything they do, participates in the Holy Eucharist. His knowledge as given. He was following them, even though he never knew what he was doing. Okay? At some stage in the life of Augustine, he began to question the basis of his Christian beliefs. Confrontation, the second part. Everything became meaningless. In fact, he doubted the existence of God and could not find strong arguments in the Bible to prove God's existence. Confrontation, the second stage of knowledge. Now, what happened? He did not shy away from this confrontation. He lived and embodied the confrontation. What did he do? It led him into apostasy. Confrontation led him into apostasy. The apostasy was a period within the second level of knowledge development. Apostasy. He lost his faith and began to partake in all sorts of immorality. At this stage, though, he continued to seek for meaning in life. You see? He continued to seek for meaning in life. He continued to question, is there a God in charge of everything? Where is this God? What gives meaning to existence? This is devoid of what you already know. He knew that he was given this indoctrination. He has answers to it already in the giving, but he was not satisfied. He was curious. He kept asking, who is in charge of everything? What is the true religion? Is there a true guide for human conduct? If so, which religion represents the true guide? Where can wisdom be found? These and many other questions continue to perplex the mind of young Augustine. To answer these questions, he encountered different religions and philosophical schools of thought, such as Pythagoreans and the Manichees. All to no avail. No one could answer and resolve his confrontation. Augustine's period of confrontation with the given was quite lengthy and rigorous, but he didn't run back to make do with what he already knows. He didn't run back. He didn't avoid it. He lived and embodied the crisis. Come, now see how this crisis molded him. Then he encountered Bishop Ambrose of Milan, the Catholic Bishop of Milan in Italy. The homilies of Ambrose served to convince and clear Augustine's doubts about the Christian faith he rejected ab initio. Augustine then began to develop his personal knowledge as self-awareness about God, religion, truth, and morality. He came to the realization that God is being itself, ipsum esse, and the source of all other beings. This is Augustine's own encounter with God. And the product of his encounter with God is his own personal revelation of God. His own personal revelation of God. He gave God a personal name following his encounter, his confrontation, and the resolution of that confrontation. His self-awareness led him to describe God as being itself, ipsum esse. He became convinced about his faith and not only practiced it tenaciously, that is intentionality, but also preached about it and encouraged others to do so. What happens? His knowledge became identical with his action. Intentionality. Nothing from that point onwards could hinder Augustine from living out his Christian faith to its fullness. He became very, very assertive. Assertive. He kept, based on his self-awareness, his conviction, his intentionality, he began to assert, to apply, to act, to down every consequence and live or act by the good. He eventually, because of his intentionality, knowledge, and assertiveness, he eventually became a priest and a bishop of the church. So Augustine was bequeathed the Christian faith from birth. Thesis, knowledge as given. In essence, he had some doubt about faith, that is confrontation. He confronted the doubt, resolved it successfully, and eventually became a resolute Christian. That is self-awareness. To continue practicing his faith diligently, he broke away from all hindrances and asserted the beliefs through his action, preaching and writing thousands of literary pieces. That is intentionality and assertiveness. Yet he was aware of his freedom of religion and that of others too. He did not abuse them. So what you see in Augustine is a model of to know is to do. You see someone who goes full length in search of answers, in search of foundation for what he already received as knowledge. He confronted his confusion, conquered them, self-discovered, rediscovered himself, got self-aware, right? And based on his self-awareness, he found the true knowledge of God and gave God a name that emanated from his self-conviction. Ipsum esse, God has been. And he built his philosophy and theology based on that idea of God is being. So you can see that he lived and embodied the knowledge that he received based on his self-awareness, of course, through the aid of Ambrose of Milan. And that is what the Socratic model of knowledge is. There are others who lived by this and even died by it. There are others. You can name a couple. In today's world, in India, one good example of this thing I'm talking about, I kept saying it, is Peter Obi. You look at him, he's a man that is so personal. He doesn't care whoever says. He does these things because he's so self-aware and so self-convinced. Check all the places you have seen Peter Obi. You see how immaterial he is, how selfless he is. You see, you can count the number of attires he wears while going out. He doesn't care. He has been laughed at, ridiculed, that he always wear one or two clothes. He doesn't care. He does it. He keeps living his life. With all the monies he has, all the charities he funds, yet he has chose, based on personal conviction, to live in absolute simplicity. You can count 3-4 attires that he always wear. The black on black and the other one. Look at his shoes. Very, very simple. When he flies the cheapest ticket on the cheapest ticket intercontinentally and even within the country. That is self-conviction. And this is what many persons lack. And this is the reason why there is evil in the world, even amongst the professors, the priests, and so on. We know a lot about the good life, but we do very little related to the good life. It is the total opposite of what philosophy in practice and Socratic model of knowledge represent. In essence, the one who knows and does the wrong thing is more ignorant than the one who does not know and does the wrong thing. And that is why, even in the Bible, it is said that what? The punishment for those who know the right thing and choose to do the wrong thing will be more than the punishment for those who do not know the wrong thing and do the wrong thing. In essence, you can even say that the person who knows the right thing and prefers to do the wrong thing is not only ignorant, he is stupid. Whereas the person that does not know the right thing and does the wrong thing is ignorant. He's not stupid. Such a person can be saved, because if he's introduced to the right thing, he might choose to do the right thing. But this one that already knows the right thing and chooses to do the wrong thing cannot be saved, because he already has the knowledge of righteousness, but has chosen to do the wrong thing. So that is the extent of my discussions this afternoon. If this video reaches you, I pray you find time to listen to the end, and after listening, please subscribe and share. Subscribe and share. All right. Thanks for your time. I wish you the best.